Okay, so we're going to go through and do some data filtering. The main question we're going to try to ask in this Excel exercise is if we're to open a Starbucks location in the US, what might be a good time to open, and how long should we stay open? So we have sort of two questions, and we're going to do data filtering to get to both of these, get some information on both of these answers. This will also involve some data transformations, which will introduce our next part. So as always, we just download the CSV file, open it in Finder. So we have downloads here, Starbucks location hours, drag that over into part one, and then we'll just rename this. So we'll put a part one for Starbucks location hours. Okay, so then we open this in Excel, get our data loss warning, save as, select Excel workbook, click save. That constructs another data file for us here, but in the Excel format, and then we go back to our Excel. All right, so let's open this up a little bit. So the main thing we're trying to ask is, how long should we stay open for? Or when should we open, and then how long should we stay open for? The first question is, we want to get a sense of when are Starbucks locations opening? The ones that have been doing this for a while, when have they figured out when to start opening? So the place to start here is actually to create a new thing, what we call a table. This is a sort of an organized way of working with data columns. It's sort of a new feature to Excel in the last, I think it was within the last decade. It might have been a decade ago when Excel introduced this. So to do this, all we have to do is select all of our data. So I clicked on an open cell, an entered cell, and then hit Command A. On Windows, I believe it's Control A to select all of the data. And then once we've selected the data, then we do Command T, which on Windows I think is Control T. And that looks like this. So it's asking us what's the data we'd like to select, and we've already selected it. Excel knows that, so it's already entered the code for that data. And it's asking if we have headers, and we do. So we select OK, and it creates this thing, which is a table. Now, I've given you some clues, some ways of checking your work. I've given a column that tells us the hour that the Starbucks is opening, and then I've also given a column that shows the hour that it's closing. I also have a duration column, which is a time code for how long the coffee shop is staying open. These three can help us answer the questions we're about to, but and sort of check our work. But we're gonna actually construct these from scratch. This is a useful tool because not always will we have these kinds of things. Okay, so let's just first understand the data set we're looking at. The first column is just sort of a list of the column numbers. The second is the sort of store ID. So this is a unique identifier for the store. The third column is a country code. So this is telling us which country is the Starbucks location located in. And then we have opening time in our standard time format. We have closing time, and then we have the three I just mentioned. The last one is a time zone, which we're not going to use in this exercise, but we will in the next. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is try to create a histogram of all of the opening times. So you could go through and create a histogram just directly off of this, and we've done that in a past video, but it's a little bit clunky. It doesn't look good. So what we're going to do instead is hit Control, and then click, and then insert. And that's going to insert a column to the left. And we're just going to rename this thing open. open hour, and then we have to construct sort of an hour of opening. And we've in a previous video we've worked with these commands. We just enter hour, and then it's going to ask us for a serial number, which is this time code. And then we close the function, hit enter. And you can already see one of the main benefits of working with the table is that it sort of forces us into applying the same function to every row in the table. So all of our data is now has had this applied to it. And you can just check it, scrolling down, scrolling back up. Okay, so we have open hour. And what we want is to get a sense of like when during the day are Starbucks opening. So we can go into insert. As always, you can't see very much. You can see we've only scrolled down a little bit. It's really hard to read this. So the way we can summarize our data is by constructing a histogram. And here's our histogram of all the open hours. I'm just gonna double click on this, on the bins themselves. And then it brings up the formatting data series. We can click on bin width, change the bin width to 1 so that we're binning on every hour. Hit enter, and it looks something like this. Starbucks open hour. And you can see, I'm actually gonna, let's Control X this, create a new sheet, rename this figures, and then Control V. So, and then we'll zoom in. So this is Starbucks open hour. This is binning on the exact hour of opening. So this is telling us, some open at midnight, which probably means they've stayed open all night. So these are probably the Starbucks in like, airports, sort of public places that never sleep. But most Starbucks, open sort of later in the day. Looks like sort of early to mid-morning. Some are opening up even later in the day. Okay, so this is telling us something pretty good about the distribution of opening hours. So if we were just looking at this information, we would, be able to inform when, as a Starbucks, we should open. But we have a little more information to work with. So if we're a Starbucks trying to open in the US, it would be better for us to only look at the Starbucks that were opening in the US and not globally. The best reference group is the Starbucks that are most similar to us. So I'm gonna call this Starbucks open hour and then put global. And then we're just gonna save this. So we'll save this as a picture. And we'll call this Starbucks, actually, part 1.1, call this global. Maybe open global. And then we'll put this into figures. So this is gonna go to our figures folder. Oops, it's not part 1.1, it's part 1, what are we on? 4. And we'll save this. Nice. All right, so this is all of the, the global Starbucks. But if we're trying to open a Starbucks in the US, we might not care about the other Starbucks globally. The thing we might care about, I would argue the thing we'd care most about is the reference group that's most similar to us. So what we can do is go up to this drop-down menu, one of these nice things that tables provide for us. And it allows us to do what we call data filtering. So what we can do is select all of the rows in this data set where the country code is equal to US. We'll just hit enter. And what this does is it selects all of the rows where country code, this column, shows up as US. Nice. So this is telling us only the data that is coming from US Starbucks. We can go back to our figure here, and this has actually changed. It's referring to the table, but the table has now been filtered to reflect only US Starbucks. So now I'm going to relabel this as US, and then we'll save. We'll save this as picture. And one thing you can do, we've already created an image with a similar name to what we would want. So I can click on this, and instead of saying global, we'll just say US. So it sort of fills in the text for us. So I'll hit save, and then we're all set. And if we wanted to, we could go back and look at our figures. So we have our global distribution, which this is one of those things that I always get a little frustrated with Excel. It has a different horizontal than the bins are different, not in size, but in scope. Like there are a bunch over here that are not showing up on this one. One of those things, you could play around with Excel infinitely, and you might be able to figure it out. But not in this video. Okay, so because we've saved these things, we can now reference both of them side by side. All right, and of course we could do that here, but we're just doing some data filtering, and we don't need to. Okay, so we've created two figures. We filtered opening time just in the US, which is the best reference point, or reference group. But maybe we would want not just the US, but maybe we're like sort of close to the border of Canada, and maybe we would want to include Canadian Starbucks as well. So we want all of the Starbucks that are either in Canada or in the US. So we filtered on one condition, but we could also filter on more than one. So let's go back to our filtering here. So it's telling us, we're selecting only those that are equal, the country code is equal to US, exactly that code. But we can also filter on a second condition, and maybe that condition is Canada. So what this has done for us is filtered on both of these conditions at the same time. We're saying it's equal to US, so the code must be equal to the US, and it must be equal to CA. It's requiring that both of those two things be true at the same time. But this is an impossibility. That code cannot equal both at the same time. So how do we fix this? We change this from an and to an or. If we click or, what this is telling Excel is that we want it to equal US or equal Canada. So what this should show us is the entire data set of either Canadian or American located Starbucks. And one way of checking this is just to see if both Canada and US Starbucks show up. So here, definitely Canada shows up. And then we can maybe just scroll down and see if we can find a US one. Yep, so here we at least have some US. So the US Starbucks are showing up, which is awfully nice. So we can go back to our figure here. It looks like not much has changed. But again, this figure is using the filtered data. So we have Starbucks open hour. I think the consensus from class is that we should use or. So Starbucks open hour US or Canada. So we'll name this US or Canada, and then we'll just go up here, right click, save as picture, and we can click on this thing, US, Canada, and save it. All right. So now we have our third. So we have three figures, and we can just kind of look at them all together. Okay. So this gives us some more specific information about how we should think about opening our Starbucks. If we're referring globally, maybe that might be this bar in the 4 o'clock hour here. Yeah, again, it looks pretty conclusive. It's like the 4 o'clock hour if we're just looking at the US, and then US and Canada, it's still the 4 o'clock hour. It looks like globally some Starbucks open later relative to US Starbucks. This area has more density. These bars are higher relative to the peak when we're looking globally. US and Canada, there's not a whole lot that's opening, after 6 o'clock. Okay. So, interesting conclusion here. Okay, so this is one thing we can do with data filtering. We also, we can ask a bunch of other questions. We're just going to do one of them. One of the questions we could ask, in addition to what we've already done, is we can filter not just on conditions, but we could also filter on inequalities. So here, this is like a category that we're filtering on, but we could also filter on an inequality. So I'm actually going to clear this out. So now we're just back to the US. But what if we wanted to know how do opening times differ on some other category? Well, before we filter on inequalities, we should actually construct a duration value. So I'm going to clear the filter. But one thing we're going to do is actually condition on both some inequality, so like time of day when we're opening, and also on country. I'm not sure this is clear just yet, but we'll get there. Okay, so we have open hour, and we figured out that maybe we should open in like the 5 o'clock hour, possibly 6, or even 4 o'clock, depending on what we're looking at. So this is like the 4 o'clock hour. This is the 5 o'clock hour. So yeah, we actually shouldn't open in the, we shouldn't open after 6. Not many Starbucks are doing that. But another question we might ask is, how long should we stay open? So to do this, we have to figure out the duration. We're given the duration value, but I'm going to show you how we construct it. So we have open hour. The duration of the coffee shop staying open is when the time of day it opens to when it closes. So closing happens after opening. So we could subtract the hour of closing. We could subtract from the hour of closing the hour of opening. So let's put another column in here. We'll insert one. Call this close hour. And all we're going to do is just strip the time code from the closing times. So just apply the same function we have in the past, hour, and then we enter as the serial number closing times. Close this, and off we go. So we've constructed both a closing hour and an opening hour. The thing we would do next is construct a new column and just take the difference. Call this duration. And then I'll call this raw. So it's like the unprocessed version. Okay, so to do this, all we have to do is enter an equals, which tells Excel that we're doing some math. We're doing something sort of functional. And then we're going to take X and then subtract off Y from it. It's like the opening time, the closing time, and then we subtract off the opening time. This tells us the number of hours between those two values. When we hit enter, it applies it to the table, applies it to every row in the table. Okay, so nice. We have a column that represents the duration of opening. And we can plot this as a histogram. So I have this thing highlighted. I'm just going to plot this as a histogram just for our viewing pleasure. Right next to us, go in and change the bin sizes to be 1. And then we can, actually, let's copy this over to figures. And this is duration raw. Okay, so this is our duration that we've just constructed. But you can see the problem. We've constructed duration as the difference between opening and closing time, but we have all these negative values. Where is this coming from? It turns out this is coming from, you can even see this in some of the data here. So in Hong Kong, there's a Starbucks that's opening at 8 and closing at midnight. This 0 is representing midnight. It's like the very beginning of the day. So we're closing at the very beginning of the day, and we're opening at the end of it, at 8. So because close hour is 0, and we're taking the difference, it gives us a negative value. So the problem here is that we have negative numbers. In reality, this should tell us the duration should be 16 hours, right? We open at 8, we go 16 hours till midnight. But instead it's telling us -8. So this isn't like the correct visualization of the data. All these negative values, which actually should be positive. So how do we fix this? Well, it turns out we have to use another function. What we want to do is apply, we want to add 24 to this value. To get 16, I can open -8 hours of the day is the equivalent of opening 16 hours in the day. So we want to add 24 to each one of these negative values. So we're going to create a new column and call this duration clean. So if we were to take this column, or duration raw, and add 24 to each one of these values, this would also be a problem. We'd be adding 24 to these already correct values. The only ones we want to apply this positive 24 to are the ones that are negative. So one of the Excel functions that you probably will end up using the most is this command I'm about to show you. It's called the if command. We have equals and then if. So what we're going to do is only apply, we're only going to add 24 to the values that are negative. And if they're not negative, then we just leave them as they are. So here we're going to use a logical test. So what we're going to do is check whether duration raw is negative. And we'll even, so we can say, if it's negative, if it's below 0, then we do a thing. So if it's negative, we're going to add 24 to it. So we 24 plus the value. So it's the logical test was the first thing. Is it negative? The second is if this thing is returning true, what should we do? And if it's negative, then we just add 24. If it's false, so if it's not negative, then let's just leave it as is. So instead of adding 24, we're just going to click on the cell itself, and that's going to leave it as is, and hit enter. So let's just check that we did this correctly. We have 15, we should not be adding 24, so we get a 15. We get that all the way down here. So all of the conditions, whenever it's positive, it's leaving it as it is. But if it's negative, then we add 24. And if we add 24, we get 16. So we can check that, in fact, our function is only adding 24 to the rows where the value is negative. This isn't exactly right, because what we actually want is for, so if it opens at midnight and it closes at midnight, then we would say this is actually open 24 hours a day. So instead of subtracting 0 from 0 and getting 0, if the difference turns out to be 0, let's say that that's open 24 hours. So it's staying open all day. So instead of using a strict inequality, we're actually going to make this less than or equal to 0. So if it's 0 or less, then we add 24. And then we entered that in the first row, but because it's a table, then you can check it's applied it to all of the rows. Okay, very nice. So we've constructed our duration clean, and you can check that it's the same time as the confirmation column here, including this negative one. So we have 16 and 16, so we've done our work properly, which is awfully nice. So let's create a histogram of this. So go in, histogram, copy this over to figures. You drop this down below duration raw, call this duration clean, change the bins to be 1. And this is much better. We don't have these negative values, so we can see the clumping. We can also see the Starbucks that are open all day. So these are like the airport Starbucks, the ones here. Okay. So this is awfully nice. And this kind of allows us to answer our question. So maybe what we'll do is, actually, let's leave this and then we'll save this one. Save as picture. And then this is part 1 for duration global. Okay. So nice, we've created another figure just of the histograms of duration. But what if we want to know just the duration of US coffee shops? Well, we can do the same thing we did before. So we can apply a filter, say just equal to the US, and it applies the filter to US coffee Starbucks. So here we can see we have duration clean, and this is just for US Starbucks. So we'll go in, save this as picture, duration global, but it's not global now, it is US. So save this. Let's exit out of these guys. Okay, so we have duration US and duration global. And let's just put these side by side. So this can allow us to do some comparisons. You know, in the US, if we're thinking about how long to stay open, we might, it's going to be clustered around like 13 hours up to 16 hours. So it's sort of in that range. And globally, that's about the same. So these aren't that different. Okay. But the magic with what we're about to do is actually that, we know we're going to be opening pretty early in the day. So we don't care about, we're in the US, we don't care about coffee shops globally necessarily. We also don't care about the Starbucks that are opening later in the day. All we care about are the coffee shops that are opening early like us. So we've filtered country code on the US. We're only looking at US Starbucks, but we can also filter on the ones that are opening early like us. So not only do we have equals, but we can also check all of the Starbucks that are opening early. So let's say, so we're actually going to open, let's say like before 7. It's like one of these times looked like it was good for us. So we're going to say our opening time is less than 7. and then we'll apply this. Okay, so that's eliminated all of the Starbucks with an open hour that's 7 or greater. So this data set only has US Starbucks that are opening before 7. That's our reference group, so that's what we've got. And you can see that the histogram sort of shows that here. So this is US and early. And then here, this is US Starbucks opening early. So I'm going to save these two figures and then we can just peek. So open, call this US early. We could save this one too if we'd like. But for now, we're just going to go in and look at early. Okay. Just pull all of these things up, all side by side by side. So duration clean looks pretty similar to duration clean in the US. But we also have this last nice visual where we can compare the US Starbucks that are opening early to those overall, which is, it looks like if you're opening up later, you stay open a shorter amount of time, which makes some sense. So based on this, we should open before 7 and stay open for 15 to 16 hours. Okay, so this is 2 types of data filtering. We've applied categorical filters, we've applied inequalities, and we've applied sort of compound filters. So we've used compound filters, categories, and inequalities at the same time, and we've applied 2 categories. Okay, we'll leave it here.